All right. Thank you, everyone, for gathering with us this evening for tonight's Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education meeting. Once again, I know you've met me before, but my name is Toni Constatman. I'm the Chief Communications Officer here at the Kentucky Department of Education. And for those joining us for the first time, just a quick overview that each of those that are joining us as part of the coalition have been selected to be a member of this coalition as we are looking to examine what is working and what we might improve about Kentucky education as it exists today, how we might envision educational opportunities for the next generation, and how we might hold ourselves accountable to the high promise of offering a quality education to each and all of Kentucky's children over the next couple of years. We would like to thank those of you who are tuning in virtually on the KDE Media portal and who will follow along with us on this important work. Before we get into the particulars of tonight's meeting, I would like to introduce our Commissioner and Chief Learner, Dr. Jason E. Glass, who will provide us with some opening thoughts for this meeting tonight. Dr. Glass.
Thanks, Toni. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome everyone. It's great to connect with you. I'm sorry that I could only be with the meeting with you for just a little bit at the last week's meeting, but I am able to listen in tonight and really excited to see where the work goes. I did also have the chance to read through the profiles that you were putting together and just see the work that you're doing. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot of detail, but it really is going to pay off, and there is some rich thinking that's coming out of this group. This coalition has shown again and again how important and powerful it is to bring together all of these diverse perspectives from the state. We've got students, families, teachers, school leaders, district leaders, community leaders, all listening and learning from each other and naming and telling those important stories about the current state of education in the Commonwealth and some of our aspirations around where we'd like to go. In our first meeting as a coalition, I offered you this charge, and that was to let go of your individual positions and really take the time to listen, empathize, and understand Kentuckians, what their experiences were, and how those may differ from your own, but how they might form a future direction for education in the state. And one of the great things about this coalition is that we have that representation from communities who experience doesn't consistently match with our highest aspirations. We've got families receiving special education services, the deaf community, the low vision, blind individuals, English language learners, Black and brown communities from across the state, as well as people from rural areas, low income families, and people from more affluent parts of our state, both cities, mid-sized communities, and rural agricultural communities. So it's a real broad representation that is on this coalition, and I think that's also going to be a strength as we do this work going forward. You'll hear a quote from one of my favorite writers, Brene Brown, that I think underscores our challenge. Brene said, "In order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be." And I think that's so important as we try to listen and understand where folks are coming from as they have told us their stories and their aspirations. It's up to all of us to give voice to those stories and to acknowledge them as real. If we aim to build a better Kentucky, a better education system for all, then it's up to us to catalog, to pull together those stories of the system as it's experienced by our users right now. Thanks again, everyone. I appreciate all the work that you're doing for us in Kentucky. Excited about the work today and what we will do going forward. Thanks, and I think I turn it back to Donnie now.
Yes. Thank you so much for those really inspiring words and a real charge to all of us to really move forward with work that we've done with such intensity and power. So I want to highlight again our community agreements, and I won't read each of them, but much like last time, because of the work that we are charged to do, I want us to highlight the Ask the Next Hard Question community agreement. And as we go into the various work groups that we are going to be in today, to carry that with us, to make sure that we are getting to the true stories of Kentuckians so that we can really support the attainment of the vision that Dr. Glass just laid out. I am, as always, is so honored and humbled by the leadership in this group. And for our connections activity on the next slide, I want to bring up to the stage Penny Christian, and just whose leadership I respect so much, and have her lead us through this connection activity.
Thank you, Donnie. Hello, everyone. How's my volume?
It's good.
Great, thanks. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Penny Christian. I'm one of your family members. Family members, I got it. I am in Lexington. I am immediate past president of 16th District PTA. I'm on the state PTA, and I'm a member of the Pritchard Committee, but I'm also a mom of 4. And when I was talking to Donnie about this question, it was hard. It was challenging. I won't say it was hard. It was challenging to really try and find something that would possibly relate to what we're going to be doing next. So we thought about this and describing the last time you went from novice to expert at something. And I'm just going to have you put your answers in the chat. And as you figure out what it is you want to put in the chat, I have some guiding questions, because I'm going to give you my example, the last time I went from novice to expert. And for me, it is advocacy, when I was a novice advocate. And now I do consider myself an expert, and those who know me will also also agree with that statement. So when we talk about going from novice to expert, one thing I would ask you is, did you seek outside help? Right? Did you do this in a vacuum, or did you realize that I cannot do this alone? I'm going to need someone to guide me, to assist me, to mentor me, whatever the situation was, right? And the other is, how did this impact your confidence? When you go from novice to someone who's just not too confident, who's not too sure about what you're doing, and then you go to expert, where I can teach you something, right? I know that I am knowledgeable in this area, whatever that area may be. If you took a cooking class and you went from, oh my God, I can't boil water, to now I am a chef, how did that impact your confidence? Donnie, are you manning the chat box, or should I be? Because I'm really curious what this is going to look like. You're muted, sir.
I think we'll all be seeing it. So
okay.
I appreciate Chris. Thank you for starting off the chat.
Yeah, that's
and everybody to put in their story about the last time we went from novice to expert per Penny's.
And what's important about the story part is, when I do trainings, when I do advocacy trainings with families, the first thing I tell them is, share your story. Right? Because everyone has one. When you advocate for children, it more than likely started with someone, either your own child, a niece, a nephew, a family friend, someone that really spearheaded, that got you going, right? For me, it was my 6'4", now 31-year-old lawyer daughter, who in first grade was seen as not so confident, and so they decided that they weren't going to push her. So share your story. It's always personal. Right? And that helps you to be able to empathize. So when we talk about this, so I'm trying to read, because some of them I know are amazing. Oh, yeah. Something I loved learning about was Twitter, right? Oh my gosh, I have just never wanted to do Twitter, but once I joined Pritchard, they kind of peer pressured me, right, into going. So now I just tweet everywhere and to everybody, right? So, I mean, it is what it is. And so another thing I want to ask is, were you able to create your own method when you did this improvement, or did you find an already existing paradigm, right? Were your parameters your own, or did you have to work within the confines of something else? All of this comes into play when you go from novice to expert. And I think you know where we're going when talking about, when using terminology like novice, right? So based on that. At some point, I guess we're going to go ahead and let anyone who wants to share, feel free to do so.
Nice. I'm seeing, Penny, just real people speaking to the power of mentorship,
Yes,
the power of community. It's really beautiful.
Oh, I love that. Stinging lessons. Yeah. My youngest, well, one of my older is actually a music teacher, and she was so frustrated with not being able to have her kids sing, right? And she's like, singing virtually is just not the same. So they figured out how to do small groups and that sort of thing. And it was such a stressor for her. No experience to a mentor teacher. You know, I'm convinced I will never learn how to knit. Looping, I had no idea. No, I still can't knit. Latch hooking is enough for me. That's stressful enough. Oh, wow. Newborns, yes, because you know what? Like I said, my mom of 4 girls. The oldest one is 33. I still don't know what I'm doing, so it all works out. Leaving your country, wow. Give them a bath. Yes. Painting. Special education. Go ahead.
I appreciate that, Matt. Like the number of things that I feel like I can learn how to do via YouTube around the house.
It makes me feel better as the father of 2 toddlers. Yeah, no, no, there is no manual, and no matter how many experts you talk to, you still don't feel like you got it. You'll teach me? I'm resistant. I don't know why, but I'm resistant. Coaching distance running. Oh my gosh. Speaking anytime, yes. So Donnie, I'm looking at all of this, and based on what we discussed and what we know we're going to be doing, how do we really just embrace all of this, right?
Well, I think that our whole process has been about stories, Penny. And what I'm seeing here is everybody has a story of learning and improving.
Yep.
And I think that's exactly what our system is really about. And I think that this has been such a wonderful and empathy-driven way for us to reconnect, Penny, after a week apart.
Yes, sir.
And I just want to thank you for the prompt and the energy and the guiding questions.
Of course. I see, Judith, you talked about Slack. I still can't embrace Slack. Rachel Bellin would just be so disappointed in me, but Slack and I do not bond. So I get it. I'm proud of you, Judith.
All right. We have much to do, and I'm so grateful for your leadership, Penny, and thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause for Penny, virtual or otherwise? Thank you all. All right, so on this theme of improvement and going from novice to expert, we wanted to go more deeply as we have each week into dimensions of assessment and accountability. And this week, this is actually the one that had the most votes, our very first meeting together, about what was most interesting to people and what they really felt like was the thing to really consider most deeply. And that's the issue of improvement and timing. The questions of how do people get better at things and on what kind of cadence they need feedback about their performance. And all of us have these stories about how we got better at things. And I want us to all carry that as we welcome to the stage Matt Shirley and Michelle Hunt. Matt is the Director of Digital Learning in Metcalfe County, and Michelle Hunt is the CAO in Fleming County. And we are so grateful to have their voices with us today. And we're going to speak about improvement and timing from a few different perspectives: academics, athletics, and out-of-school activity. And we're actually going to start off in reverse order. So Gretchen, if you could put up that video, and I'll intro it a little bit as we're getting going. But I had a chance to connect with Steve Meadows. Some of you may know Steve. He is the director of the Kentucky High School Speech League. And I got a chance to talk to him a little bit this morning about how he thinks about this question of improvement. And so I'll play this quickly, and then we will turn it over to our live guests. But we're just going to use this to kick us off.
Well, in speech and debate, we have a couple of different ways that we assess. And one of those is, of course, in regular practices. When students are working on performances with their coaches, they get feedback, and there are a couple of different ways we do that. Sometimes we do a full run through of a speech, we give notes immediately afterward, or we do what we call a stop and go performance, which is where someone's performing and then, we stop and say, okay, what do you mean by that line? What are you trying to say? What can you do physically to, enhance what you're saying? That sort of thing. In debate, we may give a lot of feedback on cases as kids are writing those, question where evidence goes, but it's all very one-on-one. It's much like a paper conference for an English teacher. It's all direct, it's all as we go. And then when we go to contests, of course, the big educational component of a contest is that ballot that kids get. If they win the debate, they want to know what helped them win the debate. If they lose the debate, they want to know why they lost, what arguments they lost. And in speech ballots, we give feedback on performances, the effectiveness of it. We do a comparative ranking, and they want to know why they stood out or didn't stand out in the room of different performances that they saw. So it's very individualized, it's very immediate in both the preparation and in the formal assessment, which would be our contests. And the speech and debate world, we train moms, dads, teachers, former students, all how to assess these contests using national standards from our national organization, as well as the Kentucky standards that we've developed for particular contests that are unique to Kentucky. So that's sort of how we do it here and when we do it.
So, the thing to have in mind as we listen to that was just the idea of how do people improve and how often do they need feedback and on what kind of cadence. And I'm going to offer up that same question to our guests, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle first to just share a little bit about her thinking about those questions. How do you think about teacher improvement, student improvement, system improvement from an academic lens?
Sure. Thank you so much for asking us to share our story. And when preparing and thinking about this question, it was very difficult to think about how I would share going from a district and turnaround to transformation, because a lot has happened in that process. But thinking about it, I think we started with just an open and honest assessment of where we were. We had to look for quick wins to create some buy-in and momentum for our teachers and our students. I think the biggest key was connecting the dots, helping teachers understand that not necessarily new initiatives, but the things that we were doing to improve student performance and improve the learner experience, all was connected. It wasn't siloed. It wasn't extra work. It was a connection of systems. So we did a lot of work around a systems approach, and we utilized Plan, Do, Study, Acts in all of our classrooms and our buildings at the district level, school level, down to the individual level. We assessed our strengths through the Gallup Strength Finders, and we ensured that our people were in the right place to be as successful as that they could be, and that they knew their strengths and how to utilize those to gain leverage. We constantly were seeking student and teacher voice and valued it, not just student and teacher. When we created our graduate profile, we also discussed with parents what they valued in students, and our community members, our all of our stakeholders, to find what the true skill set was that we expected a student that graduated from Fleming County High School to have. We found ways to demonstrate leadership. We provided many opportunities for teachers to grow and advance within our own system. We do an MBCT cohort. We offer collaborative release time where teachers go and share and learn. We know that, we all know that in isolation, we really don't grow. So the more we can be collaborative in our processes through our students and through our teachers, that has been a key factor. We have a local aspiring cohort, new teacher induction meetings, similar to everyone else. In turnaround, we utilized advanced ed standards as a roadmap. And during that time, we really worked diligently to support common language, common goals, common assessments, common curriculum. That way that we had a baseline for everybody to come to the table and discuss how we improve. Internally, we used formative quality reviews to target learner, teacher, and leadership growth. I will say under the leadership of Dr. Kreisman, he is the chief learner. He self-evaluates every month and provides a reflection on where he is and who he is as a learner. He utilizes his strengths to make decisions. And I feel like from the top down, we now all use those same features as Fleming Countyans. So we adjusted our CEP to mimic the common language of our graduate profile competencies. Within the formative quality reviews we use in schools, it was recognized as a powerful practice in the district. We do that twice a year, and I think the key here is we don't do it to schools, we do it with schools. We're in the trenches with them, identifying the data and how we can improve the learner experience. We utilize Elliott data, instructional data. We have common benchmarks that we utilize. We utilize our graduate profile data through a system called TOTE, which has been really beneficial to us. And we really focus in on engagement over involvement, making sure every learner in our system is fully engaged and has the opportunity to grow.
Wow, that's incredible. Appreciate that story so much, and the symmetry between your learning process and the process that you expect of teachers and students is a really powerful model, I think. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt to share about his experience with improvement. And he occupies a unique circumstance as overseeing athletics and this domain of digital work and digital learning. So really how he thinks about those things as similar or different, and his experience in Metcalfe County.
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I think I offer maybe a little bit of a unique perspective because I am a director of digital learning here, but I've also for the last 3 years been athletic director for our district. And before that, in leading to that, I didn't really aspire to be an athletic director. I don't know if anybody does, but I was talked into it. I coached everything from volleyball, basketball, cross country, and tennis here, and I think that was just kind of a natural progression, I guess. And Penny, I will say that I am not an expert in at least 2 of those sports. So coaching a sport that you're not an expert in is kind of tough. But what's interesting is I think the way that coaches coach players seems to be so different to me than the way we approach things in education. Because you take a coach and they practice plays or they practice doing certain skills. And if their players don't have those skills, they go back and practice them some more. And they might try something different to teach those skills. And it's very easy to assess because if you play a game and, the defense or whatever that you're calling out really stinks in that game, that they didn't get it, right? So you go back the next day in practice and you start doing those things again. It, might be the same thing with a music teacher. You teach a kid to play an instrument. Well, as soon as you hear them play that instrument, whether they've mastered that or not. So that's kind of the way athletics approaches things and coaches approach things when it comes to teaching. But, with education, and my wife is a third grade teacher here in the district, and she's teaching summer school right now. And she's been assigned five students, 5 little boys that have finished first grade this year. She's been told that their reading level, she's a third grade teacher, but she's been assigned these 5 boys. Their reading level is just barely, they sight words is, that's about where they are. So she's been assigned those 5 boys. In the first half of the day, they work on, sight word games. She tries to do fun things with them, but they said, teach these boys to read. That's your task in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, they do fun activities with the rest of the kids. But she says these kids have really loved this summer program and what they're doing, because she says, I'm doing games with it. We're doing sight word games. We're doing, I'm giving them a lot of individual attention because there are just 5 of them. And they're reading books and they're learning. And she said, I've had 2 of these boys say to me, I wish school was like this. I really like this. I'm enjoying this. And that's something you wouldn't expect to hear, young boys say about summer school, right? But and she said, she said to me, I wish I could teach school more like this. I wish it could be more like this. And so I just said, why can it not? And she said, well, she thought about that. And she's been teaching for over 20 years. She said, I guess I feel like maybe I'm, there's so much content to teach that I feel pressure to keep moving with a large group, and so I think that's a big problem for us in education. With sports, you don't necessarily keep on moving. You don't go to something else until the kids have the basics or the foundation. So that's something that I find really interesting, and maybe see a disconnect there, because a lot of times we'll even see kids with straight A's in class. Yet you look at their MAP scores maybe, or their other assessment data, and you see that they're struggling in those subjects. So there's that disconnect there. So it's certainly interesting to think about the differences and similarities with how we approach sports and athletics and how we approach education. So thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate it. I was really excited to do this. I'm glad you asked me, and can't wait to see where we go next.
Yeah, that's so great. And I really appreciate, and I'm sure we all do, this multi-part and multi-lens approach to thinking about improvement. And humans are natural learners. And I think we all know that based on the connection activity that Penny led us through. And we all want to get better at things. And so just as we transition to the next part, I hope that you'll just consider this question. And if you feel moved to do so, respond in the chat. How do these stories of improvement and timing compare with your experience of assessment and accountability in the current system? We all have quite different experiences, although we all have experiences with learning. And we've heard 3 perspectives now about improvement as seen in different places and in different lenses. So just take a second to reflect on that as we transition. All right, Gretchen, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm sure people will just have a second to consider and reflect on that. So we wanted to just give you a little bit of a heads up about what happened since the last meeting. And we have quite a bit to do today, and it's really quite a powerful body of work that we've been able to accomplish so far. And we are very excited about what lies ahead over this meeting and next. What we have done since the last meeting is go through, and based on the conversations that we heard and the notes that we saw, we undertook a series of edits and clarifications. And we then created that survey that we sent to you and asked you to review the user profile for a stakeholder group that you match up with. So students reviewed student profiles, teachers reviewed teacher profiles, etc. We compiled feedback and the decisions from representatives, what you voted on relative to the FISTA 5, and we put them into the slides in the notes section. And we made a little bit of an icon saying what we understood the status to be of each one. And we put a box in there, or put a little circle, and also left the notes section open that allow you to share the status of the decision-making process as we move forward today. And so we just wanted to be transparent with what we did backstage with the work on those user profiles, picking up where you all left off last time. And with that, I'll hand it over to Gretchen to get us started with getting across the finish line with these user profiles. That's the big goal for today.
Thanks, Donnie. And just a couple of notes before I hop into our first task. In the big picture today, we're going to work in two different groups. So first, you're going to go back to the group that you worked with last week. We're calling these the profile building teams. So you're going to reunite with your profile building team. And you have some work to do in there. You're going to review the profiles because, as Donnie said, we may have made small adjustments based on things you said kind of at the end of your discussion but didn't have time for. You're also going to review the ratings and feedback that came from the survey. Those are in there. I'll show you in a little bit, but there's a little green box that has that information. And we're going to ask that you revisit the Spanish-speaking listening tour data to see if there's anything from there that ought to be included. For those of you who have profiles of families, that's particularly relevant to you. And then determine whether to change or not change each profile, with the goal of then being able to hand this off to the second group that's going to work with profiles, which is the role-alike groups. So students are going to engage with the student profiles, teachers with the teacher profiles, families with families, etc. And when we get into those groups, we have a different set of sort of tasks to do. And I'm going to explain those when we get there. I'm not going to explain all of it at once. That would be overwhelming. But I'm just going to say in the big picture, as Donnie said, the goal is get these profiles really done so that individually we think they're strong profiles. But also when you're in those role-alike groups, you're going to look at the set of profiles. You're going to be asked some questions about, do they as a collection show the picture of this kind of user across the Commonwealth? And you're going to have the chance to identify if you think any voices or stories are missing, because we can take some time in July and August to do some outreach, to get some additional stories and build additional profiles if that's what we need to do. And our team can help with a lot of that. So that's the sort of big picture. Time with your profile building group to do these things on this slide. And then when we come back, we're going to reorganize into those role-alike groups and really look at not just the individual profiles, but the set of them. We have lots of specific directions. All of them are in the working slide deck. And we are sort of hoping that those directions are going to work well. But I'm also just going to acknowledge while we're all together here, as we're trying to wrap these things up, this is synthesis. Synthesis is complex. And so we've done our best to offer you kind of step-by-step processes to follow. But it's important that you remember two things. One is that if you get in there and the process doesn't make sense, come back out to the main room and we can get you help if you don't have a facilitator with you. We've tried to spread ourselves around. And the second thing is keep in mind the big goal, right? The big goal today is finalize each individual profile, look at the set of profiles and figure out if we're missing anybody. If you keep those two big goals in mind, honestly, even if our directions are terrible, you basically can't go wrong. And I think it's going to be okay. So moving ahead, some considerations that we wanted to put out here as you head back into your profile working groups. And this is where that quote that Dr. Glass referred to earlier comes up for us. In order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be. So as we're finalizing these profiles, the goal is to make sure that we stay as close to what is described in those quotes as possible. Remembering that there are all these different layers of identity, race and class and geography and language and gender, differing ability and different neurology, all these things matter in these individual stories. And we have to ensure that critical stories are maintained even while we try to come up with this set of narratives that are sort of representative. And we just want to name that each of your groups is going to kind of be dealing with that tension today as you shift to looking at the collection of profiles that probably already began for you when you went in and reviewed the full set of profiles and gave feedback in the survey. So we just want to call out here, like, let's all be attentive to that. That there are going to be opportunities today, for example, for you to identify quotes that haven't found a home in a profile, but we want to hold on to and probably build a profile around, because just the fact that they didn't match with other quotes doesn't mean that that's not a story that's not important. So just a reminder to be kind of balancing that line between a collection of narratives that are representative and making sure that individual stories that are really compelling and important also don't get lost in this synthesis process. So, oops, I'm going to go back. So you're going to go out now into your profile building groups, and I'm going to just put in the chat here the link to the working deck. I'm going to stop sharing for a second so you can see that. Oops. For some reason it's not letting me stop sharing. There we go. I'm just going to show you really quickly what this looks like. So when you go in right now, you're just going to be working on the directions from these 2 green slides. We're going to go in here 3 different times in 3 different groups today. This is where like the directions could become mind-boggling. We've tried to color code. I don't know how you all feel about color codes, but I find them very helpful. I have colored pens at my desk at all times. So we have these green slides with directions about what to do in your profile building team. And the directions are right here on slide 3. And slide 4 tells you where to go in the deck to find your slides by group. So when we go out to these groups in a minute, everyone should feel free to get into the deck and then find your way down to your slides and be working in your group. You're going to have 30 minutes in your group. And we're going to keep track, and maybe you get done sooner because for some of you, you're going to find that the feedback that came from the survey is basically like, hey, I like that profile, which means you really don't have a lot of work to do. But others, you're going to see that they left some notes, mostly on those that we had left kind of incomplete. So we'd like you to get work done on those that are incomplete or where there's significant feedback. Okay, so just to clarify, the tasks are here on slide 3. The goal is to finalize these profiles so they can be handed off to the role-alike groups in the next part of our agenda today. Okay, any questions before we go forward? All right, hang on to your hats. Let's go into the first breakout group. Know that my group, just in the nick of time, finished our revisions and are ready to send them off to our role-alike groups. I hope other groups similarly feel like they got their profiles pretty far along. We are going to transition to our role-alike groups, and I'm going to pull up the slides again just to give some directions. So apologize for just needing a minute to get my share screen going. Here we are. Role-alike groups. We are going to do 2 rounds of work in our role-alike groups. The first one is to evaluate the profiles, and we are going to provide you a reflection question. I'm going to show that to you in just a second. And then the second round is going to be to look back at the data from the Padlets and or the Spanish-speaking listening tour and decide if things are missing. And then within our user-alike groups, we're going to vote on these profiles and make note of if we couldn't come to agreement, or just if we think there's something important to know about how or why we made the decision that we did. So before we hop into that work, I just want to give a couple of reminders about some principles of this inclusive co-creation that we are doing together. One is, when you have a thorny question, bring it to the table and involve the people who experience it, those closest to it. So we're about to share some complex questions, or at least we think they're complex questions. And on purpose, we're giving these back to the members of the coalition who are also members of that user group, because those are the people closest to these profiles. And the second one is, in the final product, be transparent about how and why decisions were made. Because we have some decisions to make in these role-alike groups. So for example, we have this question for the family group. And family group, even before I begin, I just want to acknowledge you all have a lot of profiles. And so you're going to have some big work to be doing today. Donnie's going to stay with you as a team through these 2 rounds of working time. And we want to ask you this question. Does it feel more authentic and powerful to connect the experiences of families who report systematically feeling unknown by the system? If you look in the profiles and if you look at the original quotes in the Padlet, there are people of a lot of different backgrounds who identify a similar set of feelings, this feeling of being unknown. Is it more powerful to put those into like a single profile and annotate the profile to say, this includes views from these different kinds of people, families with English language learners, families with learners who have special needs, Black and brown families, etc. Is that better? Or is it more authentic and powerful to create distinct profiles that even though they have the same feeling, you want to call out that there is this profile with that feeling, this profile with that feeling, this profile with that feeling? We think this is a kind of big question for you to consider in the family group. When we go into these role-alike groups, we've provided a prompt, not this exact prompt, but a prompt that we think is really relevant and gets to kind of a big question for each of these groups. When we go back in our second round, we're going to revisit this second question for all of us. It'll be the same in our second round for everyone, which is that there's this phenomenon of we have some quotes that didn't make it, from the Padlet into profiles. That may be just fine. It may be that they didn't fit topically. It may be that they didn't have a sort of specific enough detail to get to a compelling need. But it also might be that it was a quote that made us uncomfortable or just didn't feel like the others, but still was very important. And so we didn't build a profile because we didn't have a way to connect it with other quotes, but gosh, we don't want to lose what's in that quote. So in our second role-alike time, we're going to all delve into that same question. So I'm not going to read through these, but just so you know, these are the questions for each of the role-alike groups. And like I said, in this first round in role-alike groups, you're going to evaluate the profiles using that reflection question. You're going to vote on the profiles because the groups that made these have voted on them, but you guys are the ones closest to these profiles. So we want to make sure that you have that chance to do that. And then you're going to be prompted also to make note of who isn't in the set of profiles. This is your first time looking really across the profiles as a group. So like students, you're going to look at the full set of student profiles and you're going to go, I think this kind of student is really not represented in these stories. And there's a place for you to make note of that on a sort of bright blue slide that's in the working deck. Then we're going to come back here and get some new directions before we do the second part, because giving directions for a lot of things at once seems too hard. So any questions about what we're doing now? We're going into these role-alike groups. We're going to review profiles based on this big question that we have. We're going to vote on the profiles and we're going to make note of who is missing, if anyone is missing. We may also look at the profiles and be like, you know what, this is a pretty good picture. Like family group, you have a lot of profiles. You may well decide actually that everything is there. You just need to organize it in a way that feels good to you. Okay. I'm going to say, Lauren, you should go ahead and send us off into groups unless there's something in the chat where somebody has a question. Okay. All right, Lauren, go ahead and send us out. We're going to have 15 to 20 minutes. We'll see how time goes, okay? Wonderful. Welcome as we're making our way back. So I'm going to give directions for this second round of work in role-alike groups. And I hope that you and your team can transition into those. We're going to have about 15 minutes for you to work on this next round of work. Let me again share my screen real quickly. And I think I'm just going to leave this here rather than go into presentation mode so you can just see. So headed back into our role-alike groups. Hopefully you're making good friends there and having a nice time in your role-alike groups. We're going to continue working together, and we're shifting our focus now to looking back in the Padlets, which is where we originally collected quotes. And if you're in the family team, we also want you to look closely at the Spanish-speaking listening tour, because most of those quotes are from families. And see if you want to add things to your profiles, or just to make note of what you do with quotes that haven't made their way into profiles. So there's a very specific set of questions in the working document that you'll see when you get in there, but I'll just read them out so that you know exactly what you're up to. So when you're in there and you look at a quote, let's say you go in and you enter the Padlet associated with your profile, and you see that there's a quote there that wasn't included. We want you to check and see if that story or feeling is already represented. Again, sometimes these quotes just are on such a similar theme that that's already been covered. If that's the case, don't do anything. Just leave it there in the Padlet and that's fine. If that's not the case, and you're like, gosh, this isn't really covered, then you need to evaluate, was it not included because it just doesn't illustrate a compelling need? There's just sort of not enough there. If so, also just leave it in the Padlet. That's fine too. However, if you find a quote that is not duplicative of others, and not just, not sufficiently illustrative of a compelling need, but just is different. It just didn't fit with the others, but it's compelling and it's important. On slide 44 of our working deck, which is just the very last slide, we want you to copy that quote onto that slide. And we are going to do work of either building profiles around those, or reaching back out to you to figure out how to do that. But we want to make sure that if you see a quote in there that you think is important, we don't just lose it today. So slide 44 is the place to put those quotes. Okay, we've got 15 minutes. I know the timing just always feels hard, but I'm going to send you off into groups, back into these roll-alike groups, to go through that process. And again, the directions are in the slides. If you head to slide 10 in the working deck, you're going to see the very detailed directions for this. Slide 10 in the working deck. And slide 11 in the working deck helps you know which slides to go look at if you didn't know that already. Okay? All right, Lauren, let's head back out. And again, if you're there and it's not making sense, pop back out to the main group and we'll try to help. Okay? Let's go. Whew. Well, here we are back to the main room. And I know we just cut off our conversation quite awkwardly in our room. Sorry about that, Brigitte. I know that was you.
That's quite all right.
We have just a few minutes left. I want to say a couple of things, and then Donnie's going to introduce one idea today so that we're kind of working on it in our thinking over the next week before we come back together. But what I want to say is, if in your roll-alike groups right now, you ended in a place where you're not quite clear about your plan, like for the next week or what you want to do to reach out to other users, we'll be emailing you as a group to just make sure that we're on the same page about that. And so community group, I will email you guys with follow-up from where we left off. But other groups, if you didn't end with utter clarity, because maybe time was just very mean to you, we will follow up and email you as a group about that. Donnie, can you tee up the idea of storylines real quick before we head out? I'll pull the slides up if you want to go ahead and start talking.
I'm on mute. Okay. Wow. I'm just very energized and appreciative of the family team, and also just I know that the same types of depth of processing and conversation are happening in every team. So just thank you for that. We're so close to just having these user profiles done. And the idea though is that you look across all of them, there will be storylines that pop out, something that can help us name the experience of each of those user sets. And that's going to be the foundation of the current state report. And so the way that we are imagining that we would create that is by using a frame of a problem statement. The user needs something, and you can draw from their compelling need because of, or because or for this insight that you now understand about them. And so the creation of these user profiles gives us an insight into needs across all of the families, or something distinct about some families and not others. You know, I think it's okay to name some in a slightly different way, but some unifying and connecting stories that encompass the current experience of all of those users. And so that's where we want to seed this thought for you, is that when you're looking across all of these profiles, what jumps out for you? What is this common piece? You know, for many families, for example, it's communication. That came across so many of the different profiles. This need to feel known and understood and seen and communicated with in a human way by the system. And so that's an example of a storyline that we're going to construct. And so we just want to offer that up to all of you as an idea, so that in this week between now and our last meeting of June, you start thinking about, well, what is the storyline for my user? What is the storyline for my user group? District leaders, teachers, families, students, and so on.
Just a quick hook on this. Remember, we talked last week about the form of this report that we're creating. There will be the collection of profiles. There will be these storylines that lift up some of the themes for each type of user. And then there'll be some storylines that are like about the whole of the Commonwealth. And that's where we're really going to be focusing next week, is on those storylines, which will help us get a picture not only of the current state, but also of that aspirational future state. So quick, in a minute before we go, Donnie, do you want to just pause on notice and reflect here?
And when you say pause, you mean like?
I just mean like do it.
Do it.
Yeah.
So we engaged with really challenging insights, both in what we read, but also in what we heard from the other members of the coalition. We wanted to just give a space for people to notice and reflect, like, on how that felt, because it's a challenging thing, and also give an opportunity that if you don't want to share that in the chat, then to offer up direct contact to us via email, and we'll put in all of our emails into the chat here. And you can reach out to a person who you feel comfortable doing so with, but offer this space in the chat right now to just name, how did it feel to engage with challenging insights in this space today, in this community? How did it feel? First, thank you for the wonderful, positive, challenging, honest, reflections about what it's like to do this really tough sense-making work together. I want you to look at the working deck and see how much incredibly powerful work that we've been able to do together. It is challenging to carry the weight of your people into this space with you and to make them known to all of us and to bring that voice to people who don't often have voice and to bring the perspectives of people who often aren't parts of teams and coalitions like this. And so we just want to say our gratitude, to celebrate a little bit, because this is an incredible body of work, and this will fuel the future of education in the Commonwealth, and it will be fueled by the people, by your people. And so we just want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week for our last meeting in June. And if you have any questions and further reflections, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Just a big ditto. Thank you. This work is kind of unbelievable what you guys are doing. It's just so good.